Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, remote edition, live from somewhere between Frisco and Breckenridge, Colorado, in this amazing little RV park with some...
Yeah, you can't see the whole picture, but we have some great art here about elk country and deer country and...
bears drinking tea.
Yeah, uninvited guests by Michael Coleman. And it's a lovely thing of a bear sort of going into a campsite. So that's where we're at. We're here in Breckenridge, and we're getting ready for the Leadville 100 trail run, or more so Molly is, and I'm,
I mean, I feel like you are now getting ready as like stressed out about it as I am almost, because you will in fact be pacing me, and I know that you're a little nervous.
I'm more nervous. Like yesterday we were running, and like every time your foot is near a rock, I'm like, oh my God, she's breaking her ankle. So we're into that sort of mode here of stress. And we were just talking about, like, do we have a cold? I think we might have a cold.
Oh no. Well, I'm going to blame the altitude for the fact that I've definitely just had like a lot of like dry, like sinus issues in the last few days. Honestly, I feel like I've adapted to altitude totally fine.
Mm-hmm. No, you're doing great. I was pinned going up climbs yesterday, and you were on your third day of massive runs. So yeah, it's weird. It's these like hostile environments. That's how I always describe Leadville, certainly, which is a little higher than here, but not a ton more. It just, the altitude and the exposure to the sun, and there's, often not shade.
For
so
sure.
it's just very hostile.
Yeah. And just, I think it's probably also just the dirt that I'm kicking up too.
Mm-hmm.
The dirt DW is kicking up as he goes after prairie dogs. He's really found his like main sport, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been super good since we've been here. I did Hope Pass this weekend, which anyone who knows the Leadville run, it's not in the Leadville ride, but in the run, Hope Pass is the steepest, biggest climb, and you go up and down it, and then you turn around pretty much and go right back up and down it. So did that this weekend. And I know you were very nervous letting me
go off into the wilderness.
Car,
But we hung out in the town. I guess it's a town of or a small little settlement. It's like a historical area, I guess, because it was a very early settlement in the mountains around Gold. And so I was reading a lot of plaques, so I have these semi-accurate details in my head. But I was, as Molly said, the bike course didn't go through. So, and it's been years since I was here for the bike. But that little town of Twin Lakes, it's just past where the bike usually goes, but the run course goes right through this little town. And there's a couple little coffee spots and little breakfast spots and general stores and little easy hikes. So I would say if anyone's coming for the run or the bike, and you're just hanging out, I would say definitely go over there and get a coffee or whatever, but also send your family, because it's, literally 5 minutes past where the bike feed zone is and whatnot, and is much better than the bike feed zone's in the middle. It's scenic, but it's in the middle. So anyhow, little intel as far as anyone coming to Leadville. I know there are a few listeners and folks with training plans and coaching clients as well. So
yeah, and I guess PSA, the Leadville bike is coming up this weekend. We will probably be up and around there at least a couple of the days. Obviously it's not a multi-day thing. I don't know why I said couple days. Well, I guess we'll be there like kind of before the race at least once, and possibly after the race, possibly for the race. So we'll try when we're there to wear Consummate Athlete t-shirts.
For sure.
So if you happen to be there.
In between these two big events, we have the Leadville bike and then the Leadville run the following Saturday. So this is August, now we're putting dates on these things, 10 and 17, I think.
Yeah.
Of 2024. And then in between is the Breck Epic, which is very close to where we are. And you're going to do a talk for this 2024 Breck Epic on the Tuesday.
Yes.
Is there a topic to this, or is it just like freestyling?
A little bit of freestyling, but kind of actually the primary topic is sponsorship, which I'm actually really excited about because, people might remember I do have the book, The Athlete's Guide to Sponsorship. And actually, funny enough, we've been working with this great company, Payable Apps. We've talked about them before, but with them, we helped develop this free Google Forms template for athlete sponsorship. So if you're someone who's been kind of looking and, you've tried like the Kickstarter or the GoFundMe or any of these other platforms, Gumroad, all of them where they really take a high percentage in order to collect money for you. Payable is actually a really efficacious way of collecting money from sponsors. And
they're going to come on as a podcast sponsor. They're also sponsoring your run as well. So you're going to be donning a Payable hat. So these are good friends of ours, of course, and one of them who I grew up riding with actually as well, but have developed this way to collect money in a Google form is basically the idea.
Yeah. And we do mention the fact that you grew up riding with him, because I think the fact that he's so into cycling means that as he kind of developed this form, he was like, you guys spent so many hours talking about the cycling applications for this form.
Well, and indeed, like our local cycling club uses it to collect membership money. So rather than using certain other programs that are horrible, that you may be familiar with, especially if you're in Canada, specifically Ontario, and you have any sort of club affiliation, the program you use to register is horrible. So not that I have any distaste for certain things, but it saved us thousands of dollars that we can then put towards our trails, right? Just because we're using this simple form that everyone's good with. And I like it because our members don't have to have another login, right? Like it's just a Google form. You put your name down and you pay for your fee, right? And then you have your membership for the year. So it's great. And then we've had a couple of weekly races and just different small races use this as well, again, to try and cut down their fees, because they're just small, one-time races that they might not ever do again. So it works really great for things like that.
Yeah, definitely lets you not have to pass that cost on to customers. So I think that's super helpful.
Yeah.
So we will include a link in the show notes if you happen to have anything you're trying to basically figure out a way to collect information and money for. It works super slick, and it takes like 2 seconds to set up. So that said, I'm really excited to get to talk all things sponsorship. It's one of the topics I really enjoy because it is kind of this like business marketing side of sport that I find really fascinating.
Cool.
But yeah, so that's sort of what we're up to this week. And we had a bunch of listener questions.
We've had a bunch, which is great. We've been asking for a few, so there's been a bunch come through, which is always awesome. These ones today, we'll see how many we get through. They're sort of all clustered around this idea of sort of recovery. Is that what you said? Yeah, I think a lot of it is sort of like recovery and maybe injury.
I'd say recovery and getting back to it, I think, is really like the two main focuses here, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about how to improve recovery or like what counts as recovery or anything like that. It's also, how do I get back to riding hard the next day, or should I keep riding, or do I need more recovery? So it's not recovery for recovery's sake. It's recovery for your...
And I think our podcast, but also a lot of our coaching clients, our average coaching client is around 48 years old. And there's certainly big variance on both sides of that. We have a couple down in the 18-ish, late teens, and then a few in the 20s, but a lot in the 30s and 40s, and then a bunch who are 60s and even 70s now. So the bars on that go pretty wide, but 48. And so I think you start getting concerned about recovery. I know you said around 37, you felt like things changed a little bit, but certainly as I'm now over 40, and then I have clients who always laugh when we say this because they say, well, wait till you get to 50 or 60. And so, this idea of recovery and performance as we get older into middle-aged is just top of mind, I think, right? Because you don't just bounce back from the night at the bar and the huge group ride on Saturday. A lot of times we wake up Sunday from the group ride. We used to always do our long ride after, and it's tough. You can't do it. So then these questions of how do I recover faster come up.
Right. And then there's even the more frustrating thing that as you get older, you actually tend to sleep less. Like your body keeps you awake more often. So I'm actually doing Precision Nutrition has a course on stress and sleep that I'm actually going through right now. And that was one of the things that just frustrates me to no end, is like, oh, your biology, as you get older, you're gonna sleep less just naturally. So despite maybe still needing a lot of sleep because you're training, like it does get harder and harder to get that sleep.
Now I wonder, because I've heard, but then also we need more sleep, isn't there? Sort of
yeah, that's the weird caveat.
Sometimes I wonder with this, because you also see, okay, as you get older, everything declines, and as you get older, fitness declines. As you get older, recovery declines. As you get older, you don't sleep as much. But then there's a lot of other stuff that happens in life aside from just time going by and your body aging. You have kids. You're into the most successful, wage earning years of life. You have money, you can go do stuff now. There's just all these other factors that aren't necessarily related to age exactly, right? There maybe happen with age. You become a VP executive as you're into your late 40s, 50s, and 60s would be, you're at the peak, you're trying to make a difference. So certainly a lot of, I would say my 60 to 65-year-old clients, there's a lot of that. Now we have maybe grandkids, or my kids are, around or whatever. And then there's, I have to make a difference in these next 5 years before I retire. And so that's the most important thing to me. So sometimes I wonder how much of these, like, I don't sleep as much, I don't recover as fast, I'm not as fit as I was, is because you're now 50 and 60. There's certainly a percentage, but how much of that percent, sometimes I wonder, is just, there's other stuff in life.
Fair point. I mean, Precision Nutrition will argue that it is biology.
Okay.
Just telling you.
Fair enough.
But I think you're completely right. It's
well,
like
it's definitely a
cliche.
Thereof. Yeah, you always hear of people wake up really early when they're older or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I know my mom seems to sleep in way more too, but who knows? Now that she's retired, she's been waking up to go be a baker her the last 25 years or whatever, right? So now she sleeps until whenever she wants to sleep into, and it's like okay.
Okay, well, let's get into some of the actual questions about recovery.
Cool.
So this one is actually a cool one. So this person is prepping for a mountain bike stage race coming up very soon. So let's talk about it.
So they asked some specific questions. So that's good. I always like specific questions versus like, how should I recover between stages or something like a bit more specific. So go ahead.
Loving this. Okay. Post race, how long should I ride to cool down? This is such a good question, especially with a stage race in mind.
A lot of people probably don't even think to ask this question, but I think, usually you would cool down from your interval ride. So it is a good question, like, why don't we do that? So my answer in this case was mostly what you're going to find for warm up and cool down at a long race, and certainly these stage races, is that the rest of us are not Tour de France. In Tour de France, they warm up and cool down now. Right. But we are not those, fine-tuned machines that have so much capacity for energy and, the recovery demands. Even, the Tour is just such a beast of a different thing. But we're all sort of like, coming into a week that's going to be the most stressful week. And so we're really limited by our energy. What's the word? Like work capacity, like just how much energy we can put out. So I'm hesitant to say ride for an hour before your stage, because most of us are going to get so tired during the stage finishing it, and then you have more. So you know what I mean? So there's only so many kilojoules we can put out, how so much energy we can put out. So we're hesitant with how much other energy you're putting out in the day. This is different than when we're in our training zone and we're always like, yeah, get out for a walk, go walk with the family on top of your ride, move lots throughout the day, build your work capacity. Now we're trying to save the work capacity for the race.
Well, and again, this is stage race, not just like a cross-country race. Right. Totally different, right?
I think mostly different because you do have to get ready for the next day, and a lot of times they're longer events as well. I think this is probably similar to like a marathon, Leadville. Not a lot of people are going to cool down when they finish the Leadville. They're going to...
Although we did have the discussion, though, because it is like a 99.8 mile course.
Yeah, so Molly has this dilemma, which I know is going to become an issue at about, well, I don't know what time it'll be at, but late at night, early in the morning, Molly's going to be like, oh, we have another mile to do. And I'm going to be just collapsing at the finish line.
Okay, there's two scenarios here. Like, one is that, like, triumphantly cross the finish line and get to hold up a banner, and like, I am not finishing 100 miles.
But maybe you could run up and down with the banner,
God, holding it,
high-fiving, and just keep looking at your watch and like, who wants another round of high fives? Anyhow, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Knock on wood here.
In general, so what I said is, most stages, a lot of times you're going to just roll in. A lot of times in this one, I think this is Breck Epic we're talking about. So they'll finish sort of downhill. You come back down into town. So a lot of times you're not maxed out. Some days you might be, but if your heart rate's already come down, you're feeling okay, like stop and eat some snacks and talk to people, laugh about the stage. And then a lot of times people, especially at the stage races, the way they're organized now, you sort of have your own accommodation. It's not as much as it used to be with the tents and stuff. But even in the tent scenario, you're often riding back to the tents or whatever. So I always find it's just, you probably need to walk or ride back somewhere anyhow. So stop, have a few laughs, have some snacks. They're giving you free snacks at the finish line, so make sure you get them. And then something just short. Now, if you were just like, this was a vicious stage and you sprinted to the finish line and you're like collapsing, I would say in that case where the heart rate's up, you haven't really had a come down during the stage, then I would probably cool down a bit. But it's not going to be excessive. It might be 5 or 10 minutes until I feel like I'm okay to stop and like my heart rate's come down. And usually that's, something like under 120 beats while you're riding, something like that. Just like, under your zone 2 or whatever you want to say is sort of that cool down. But most people, it's not required and or is built into the day anyhow. And then the only other piece I had on that is, this person's family is coming. So a lot of times what we love about stagers, we call them,
summer camp for adults.
Yeah, something like that. Single track summer camp. You're going to have the whole afternoon. Even if you take 5 hours, you still have most of the afternoon to get. So I said, clean your bike, which we'll talk about in a second. Get cleaned up, have a nap.
Take off your chamois.
Lunch.
Take off your chamois.
Refuel, sit around.
Take off your chamois.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. And then maybe in the afternoon, go for a walk, maybe walk to a river if you're into like the ice bathing or just sitting by a river. You don't have to put your legs in the ice bath or anything, which again, we'll talk about that later. But that's sort of what I would say is like maybe some active recovery later in the day, just walking around. And we often do that at the stage race. You go and try and find people and chat with them, and go a bit, like we had to walk the dog at QSE last year, so we'd walk him just in the afternoon, which is our normal routine anyhow, right? So I think that's it. So hopefully that makes sense, that in these longer things, it's just, there's not a ton of need to do a full like spin down like you might on your trainer in the winter after like high intensity intervals or something.
Yeah, and I think also just the stage races will kind of naturally lend themselves to not doing it. Like you say, there's usually like snacks at the finish. Everyone is sort of congregated there.
That's why you're there. Yeah, I'm always hesitant whenever like the option is like free food and socializing, right? Like it's just that's why most of us are there. Like push as hard as you can and get to the finish line as fast as you can. Like no doubt, I expect that, but like I also expect you to like participate in the event, right? And make contacts and so forth. So.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question they had is, should they do any stretching exercises, icing, anything like that? And if so, when?
What do you think about this?
Well, again, it's going to be it depends for sure. Certainly, okay, we saw at the Tour de France, icing was a big deal this year.
Icing? After or during?
After. You saw Pogacar.
During was big.
No, like Pogacar, like in an ice bath in the team bus after.
Oh, okay.
So that was, I think, has gotten a lot of people like really like ham on the idea of ice bath type things.
Yeah.
So here would be my like major caveat for that. Stage race, not the time to try something new. If you've never done an ice bath, this is not the time to start doing it. It's one thing to put your ankles in the river. Like that's pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But like submerging yourself in freezing cold water when you haven't done it before, do not recommend.
And you could probably just apply that to anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's same as like the night before Leadville, I'm doing this gymnastics strength routine. You're not going to jump in and like do it with
exactly.
the day before. Like let's work on your splits the day before, right?
Yeah.
And really like pull on that hamstring as hard as you can after not doing it for like your entire life.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a good rule of thumb, is just nothing new. And this might, what I would see, so the ice bath, the ice river, I think that's fine, like when in Rome. But, if it's super cold, just be careful, because some people do have negative, like could be skin reaction to it. It could be just you feel like junk after an ice bath, because icing does slow everything down, right? This is why you're seeing the move away from much icing in an acute injury, like you sprain your ankle. You're actually seeing less use of that. It's a hard thing to get people to let go of, but you're seeing less of that because it actually just slows everything down and freezes it in time.
Mm-hmm. I also find if you have any like circulation issues to begin with, like if you tend to get, like very numb fingers or toes, if you suddenly are icing your feet, you're probably going to end up where your toes are numb for quite a while after. So just being super careful of that. Same with the stretching exercises. Like you say, not the time to start a new stretching routine. If you already do, our quick yoga videos that we've, been posting forever, stuff like that, by all means, continue them if it feels good.
Yeah. And I think the yoga, like, not crazy, not like a lot of it, but I think a bit of movement, like laying on the ground, sitting on the ground, maybe rolling and doing something that looks a bit like a yoga move for 5-10, but super lazy and not excessive, like not hauling on your hamstring, nothing new. But even if you're not a big yoga person, I think because you're now doing something that's sort of not new, like you're hammering up a hill as hard as you can, bent over, you're going to have some aches and pains. So I don't think it's wrong to sit on the ground, lay on the ground, go through some different ways of sitting while you're, talking to people, like have your beer sitting on the ground. That stuff makes a lot of sense to me. And just sort of working against some of the, like, you're hinged over your bike and just like really hurting the rest of the day. But I think Molly's point, like if you're a yoga person and you've been doing it every morning, like Molly, like keep doing it. You might have to do it in the afternoon instead of the morning or something and mix it up that way. But yeah, I think that rule is a good rule to stick with, just because we don't know how you're going to respond. And I was going to say massage is another one that comes up. That's often offered at stage races, and I'll often take that opportunity. But I have got massages and I've done my hard, like I'll go out and do intervals that right after like massage doesn't really affect me in any way. But some people, there's actually a name for it and I'm blanking what it's called, but something like a delayed onset muscle soreness, like related to massage. It's like a condition where someone like actually has like severe, lethargy, like they're really tired or something. Yeah. So it can be like the next day you might feel like junk. So it's not for everyone, right? So just because it's offered, you would want to know that you've trained the day after, soon after a massage.
For sure, yeah. And I mean, if you haven't and you still are like, nope, you know what, screw it, I'm getting a massage, it's going to feel amazing, just maybe ask them to do like lighter pressure.
Or I was thinking, yeah, even maybe more like arms, upper body,
For sure, like
neck.
low back even, like.
Well, yeah, I maybe, but like I would say like, arms and neck and like upper back, like the relaxing massage, and then maybe something like feet, like something just away from the prime movers. I'm just always nervous with the like quads, glutes, and even a lot of our low back does a lot, right? Like it's sort of connected to your butt. So
yeah, no, you're right. Like
yeah.
I know for me, if our massage therapist, like if he goes in on my hamstrings, like they're definitely sore the next day for my run.
Right.
So it's worth being.
But you're right. So you could even have, I would like a relaxation massage. I'm going to lay here for an hour and like you give me a relaxation that's not as deep, and maybe we'll like make you go to sleep, or at least like have a bit of a nap, sort of like relaxation. That's probably very effective, right? And they always say like, is massage effective? Like probably part of it is that you're forced to lay down and relax for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else they should be thinking about other than not crashing, which is like a note that I really love?
We have at least one page, so I'll link to that in the stage or in our show notes about stage races. So stage race prep and packing list, I think, is basically the idea. So you could Google that if you wanted, like consummate athlete stage race packing or something like that. Molly's put together some great stuff around that. We do think the packing list is like a big thing, and I think usually you put in like a couple of the things that we found useful in those posts as well. Is there a free guide that's related to this? We have like a race checklist or something.
Yeah, there's a couple different like race day checklist type things, and obviously race day not quite the same with a stage race. There's going to be multiples of things needed, but definitely worth checking out. You can find that just consummateathlete.com. If you look under the learn page, there's a bunch of freebies, so you can grab that.
Cool. Okay, so that's that. So stage racing, if you followed a plan that I made, at least, then there should be lots of great prep. We've done back-to-back mountain bike days. We've worked on the fueling. We've ridden with the exact bike and gear and tires. So you're just into the celebration, and you're getting out there and just enjoying it, right? And doing it every day. I think that's perfect. The only other thing that I think I mentioned in this section for this question that they asked was, I really like when you come across the line, try and get to the food talk, whatever, but then once that's all wrapped up, try and get to the bike wash as fast as you can. Spray off your bike and then also your shoes, maybe helmet if it's needed, like if you're muddy and whatever, to try and get all that stuff as clean as you can, as early as you can, so that ideally you're done everything really early in the day and you can just relax. But also then you can troubleshoot if like something's broken on your bike or your shoe or on you, right? Like this stuff can all get troubleshooted really early, and then related to that is cleaning your body then very quickly, as well as showering and sitting in your chamois for like 5 hours.
Number one PSA.
And why? Like people always laugh, and you always have one older man in the crowd who's like, "I'll wear my chamois whenever I want," and it's like, okay, you can do that, but
please don't sit next to me.
Yes, it's disgusting in the dinner room, if everyone's eating together, but also just your risk for saddle sores when you're riding your mountain bike all day is very high. If you keep your chamois on, there's just more chance, if you don't get soaped up and cleaned up, that you're going to have a saddle sore, and then that can affect the stage or the race or just your training and recovery afterwards, right? If it gets quite bad, surgeries and stuff can come out of saddle sore. So we're pretty serious about saddle sore. So try and clean up. And again, make it so that like you have more hours where you're just super lazy. That's always what I'm thinking, is like by noon, can I be wrapped up and like napping with like no concerns about my bike?
It is just so much more enjoyable to be able to chill the entire afternoon, not thinking, oh, I still need to clean my bike, fix my chain, change out tire, blah, blah, blah.
Or like, again, you might take it to get it repaired. Again, you need a new tire, you got a flat, you have so much, and you're getting ahead of the lines. Like that's also what I'm often thinking is, can I get ahead of when now I'm waiting for my shower standing up, and I'm waiting for the bike wash standing up, standing in the sun, right? So you're just, all this stuff turns into like recovery for the next days, plural, when you can just be off your feet an hour earlier, just because you didn't sit there, on the ground eating chips because you were really tired. It's like you're not going to be less tired, in a couple hours once your body shuts down. So while you're still a little amped up and dirty, just like go spray down everything you can, get your bike clean, get your body clean, and then away you go.
Love it. Okay, next question, very much related. Best practices for preventing common cycling and running injuries. Okay. Well, first of all, we have a lot of podcasts that you should go back and listen to.
So many over the years too. Like we'll forget a bunch, but the most recent we have Greg Lehman and Chris Johnson on talking towards running injuries. I think the most recent Greg Lehman episode we were talking about the course I took, Running Resiliency with Greg, so that we spoke around a lot of ways that we might at least treat. But we also spoke towards prevention, and prevention is very hard to prove, right? Because we don't know if the people not getting injuries, we don't know if they're just lucky or if there is something, but there are probably some common themes there. We did talk, so this is best preventing running. So we're just talking about running injuries, and then we'll do this. The next one is the recovery. Okay, I got it. So things that I think are probably important that you'll see is rest days, right? So people that are on these streaks where they run every day for years, like it's, neat, but it's also, that would be like a risk that you're never taking a full rest day.
And I would point out a lot of them will still kind of incorporate a very easy, very short day in there somewhere. So if you are someone who you're listening to this and you're like, I'm not interrupting my streak for anything, you know what? A kilometer counts. And it can be done at like a brisk.
It could be short.
Walk.
I mean, I don't see why it couldn't be a walk, right?
Well, that's what I mean.
And with runners, often that's changing it where it's you're bipedal, you're moving. You could still walk 5K on an easy day, I think. That would be okay. But that gets to sort of the other concept we had is variability. So a lot of times you'll see like super monotonous training where it's zone 2 every day. That's just, I don't do intervals anymore and I don't take days off and I just ride at the same pace and the same posture on the same bike. And that's, again, where we get into issues where you're doing the same thing. It's like an overuse injury. So if we can mix it up at all, by doing high intensity some day, low intensity some days, some moderate intensity, changing the bike, sometimes riding even flat pedals on a mountain bike would be a great injury prevention. Sometimes that's how we treat injury is we actually remove the clipless pedals so that your foot and your leg can find different orientations and then, again, get more variability, but also hunt for what your body wants versus saying this is the one that you want. That can be super effective. I think we talked about that with Phil Cavell, actually, as one of the ways that what is his book called again? Something.
The Midlife Cyclist?
Midlife Cyclist. That was a great one, too, where we talk about injury and bike fitting towards injury prevention, but also sort of working around injuries and different limitations we might have. So that's a super good one we should include in the show notes, too.
Side note on the rest days, we do actually have in our Consummate Athlete store on consummateathlete.com, we have a This Is My Rest Day sweatshirt. That is one of my favorite things that we have.
Okay.
For someone who's very reluctant to take rest days, this might be a gift for your friend who never takes rest days.
Well, and then there was that whole, what was it, the rest day brags movement? I think there's an Instagram account to that effect. But it's tough. For a lot of people, it is the toughest day of the week, right? Like you have to live with yourself and you can't just go out and distract yourself with movement. And it's tough. I say that tongue in cheek, but it is super hard.
For you, I am so in love with my rest days.
Right. So we have that. So then the other thing then that's tough for a lot of people is fueling, right? And so we know that there's this red S is this new term that's come about, but the idea that if you don't fuel, especially before and during your workout, then there's going to be a risk of whether it's injury, bone stress fractures, especially in runners. It could be immunity, so sickness, illness, that would be another concern. And then also just the quality and the progression of your workouts, right? So this is something that's been very top of the news cycle and everything right now is this fueling more. And in the Tour de France, they're using so much. But for the rest of us, I say we're jumping ahead of ourselves with the 90 and the 120 grams per hour. It's because most people are doing nothing. So going from 0 to, we used to recommend 60 grams an hour, something like that, 50, 60 grams. And so now it's like trying to get us to do anything, right? And your workout is enough. So especially runners, you'll see most runners are out with nothing. They have nothing, right? And so, but then a lot of them will start tipping over an hour or doing intervals. And so it's, how do you figure out how to fuel before and after, right? And it's hard with running, especially with the gut and trying to handle that. So there's that idea. So if you are someone who's injury prone and not fueling at all, then that would be a place to look for sure. Especially with bone stress fracture, like someone's probably already speaking to you about that, but that would be, that seems to be implicated very quickly if you end up with especially multiple bone stress fractures. We talked about variability. We talked about intensity distribution. So again, not hard all the time, lots of low intensity. Generally low intensity is better tolerated, but certainly that can be taken too far as well. The one other thing I had then is sort of this idea of the program is in pencil. It's a rough plan. So a lot of us are not willing to adjust the plan. Once you get your plan, you stick to it. It's probably the similar mindset to the streaks, right?
Right. And I mean, this is one of those things where this is great until it isn't.
Right. Which is like adjusting the plan?
No, the following the program, because I think it's like we also see plenty of people who have plans and completely deviate from them in that like they either do way too much or they just don't do anything. Like the number of people who start a plan and then just like,
Sure.
oh, I'm tired today and don't do anything. Oh, I'm tired the next day, don't do anything. Like, oh, I have a headache and don't do it. Like, so I think there is a slippery slope to not doing anything, and now you're at a whole other risk of like not even hitting your 150 minutes of exercise in a week kind of goal.
Sure.
So let's caveat this, like as we're saying this, we're not talking to the people who don't do anything and need like the nudge to just get out and do something.
Sure.
This is for the people who generally are training kind of at their limit, on their limit all the time.
That's probably fair. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when you're at that lower end, we've talked about frequency limited folks and everything counts. So whatever you want to do today, whatever's easy, walking, strength, go to a class, ride your bike, run, walk, hike, ski, whatever your motive is that is attractive and possible today. But it's sort of that the Starrett's had in their Built to Move book, they talked about never do nothing. And that's sort of relevant for those folks. And then you're right. As you get to the more intensity, our advanced cyclists who will train however many hours you want every single day.
Plus 15 to 20%.
That's the tricky bit. So yeah, so it's just modifying, right? So the reason this is relevant here, I don't know if we'll get to this next question, but it's sort of around how to modify stuff. So we can tease that either for later here or next episode. But in short, I think the idea is that if you're having a niggle, your foot hurts, your knee hurts, your whatever, you're super sore, you're just drilled after a workout, then what's happened is your body is just adapting at a different pace than the plan. And we expect that. There's no way that a coach or certainly a stock plan out of, a magazine or off the internet is going to be able to predict how your body will respond to the way you solve the workout, because that's the other variable is you read the workout and then you went out and solved it somehow given your terrain, your altitude, the heat has been a popular one lately. So there's all this stress and strain on the body. And now your foot is hurting because you suddenly ran up a mountain for an hour because it said 1 hour of running. But you were doing a marathon running plan that assumed you were going to run flat, like you'd been running for the last 6 weeks. But suddenly you went to a mountain. I'm describing myself here, by the way. And so then your ankles and your calves are saying, holy cow, we just had to do this bunch of dorsiflexion. That's your toes moving towards your shins, running up a hill. And my calves, all these like calf raises, I feel like I'm pulling my calf out of my Achilles tendon. I'm a 40-year-old man. The chances that my Achilles tendon will rip out are very high.
If you could keep that attached for like 2 more weeks, that would be
I exaggerate,
great.
but only sort of. So then what I would do is, okay, well, you're going to have to modify the next day because you can barely walk. But a lot of us would go out and do that the next day had a 5K run. Well, I'm going to go and do that. It's on the plan. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's a cross-train workout. We can still say never do nothing, but it might be a walk or a cross-train where the Achilles tendon isn't, we can shift the load around. We could go swim so that it's not, nearly as muscular. You're unloaded. So that's why our consummate athlete, we're both wearing our shirts today, different eras of logos. And that's one of the reasons the 4 C's that we talk about, one of them is cross-training because it lets you shift the load to keep you consistent, right? So that you can build confidence and remain in your communities.
Ooh, nice.
I just
Good
went through
4
all
C's.
of them. But the key is that we stay consistent, but that we don't injure ourselves because that would not be consistent, right? So you don't want to push. So this is where you need to, the plan is in pencil, adjust it so that you can continue to stick with the plan. And sometimes that does mean skipping a workout and taking an extra rest day because the plan can't predict how your body's going to react.
It's true. And yes, this does butt up against the philosophy of follow the effing plan.
Right.
And
well, I mean, probably if we took me running vertically up the mountain, that might have not been in the plan.
One could argue
which is
you
okay
didn't follow
too.
the
But
plan.
then again, you have to be okay because you just didn't follow the plan to also adjust the plan on the backside of that, right? We're always okay doing more. We're always okay doing more.
All of this to say, I just mean it's like a philosophical minefield because they're all you do kind of believe in all of these different philosophies. They just need to be applied in different situations.
Right.
So it is a lot of this is the subjective. This is what we always talk about with how the wearables can't tell you everything about yourself.
Right.
And like,
and muscular soreness would be one, right? You see everyone's like, oh, my Whoop says I'm ready. And it's like, okay, what, you did a bunch of squats yesterday and you can't walk.
oh, I guarantee my Whoop would say today that I was like feeling great.
Yeah. Your HRV is probably high because you have put such a load in
Yeah,
that it's actually actually pushed your HRV. Yeah.
But currently I am like a 90-year-old trying to like sit down. Like whenever I stand up, I'm fine once I get moving. But like, it is
That's right. And your plan had Monday as a rest day after a big week.
And we were aware that Hope Pass was going to make my quads sore. There was no getting away from that.
So that's the idea. And so then the last piece then, as far as preventing injury and sort of what we know is this just gradual progression or too much too soon, which again is super vague. What it means exactly. You can get away with, okay, you're a cyclist, it's the fall, you run 10K. So one or two people will be okay. The rest will never run again. The rest will wait till next fall to try that same thing again. Gradual progression is gradual. So I always say, like, I really emphasize this like minimum effective dose. So the first few weeks of running, we'll do like a really easy run walk, easier than what most run walk programs would even be. So like 6 times during a 30-minute. So every 5 minutes, you're going to run for 30 seconds in a 30-minute walk, right? You might even just start walking if you're a cyclist who never walks, right? And that's what I mean by gradual progression. And then it can progress from there. You can solve it however you want. But the key is that when you notice that you're super sore or beginning to get injured, you have to go back a level or two and just live there for a bit. And so that's, I think, the nuance with that gradual progression is if you just jump to 10K, you might be okay, and then you can live there, but it's risky. So I would always start, at a low level and then build and then build and then build and then just step your way through it. And then you're up there, right? And then a lot of us get to a level where we're actually like pretty stable, right? You can't always increase once you're at your max hours for the week or whatever, right? So then it's sort of more in the intensity that you can progress or the variability that you can sort of play with, different things like that, right? What intensity levels are you fitting into your 90-minute workout? But that's the thing that a lot of us do when we're talking about preventing injury is like some of that, like just basics, like you didn't run and then you ran 10K at a vigorous pace. It's not surprising, right? So that stuff is like the obvious stuff we can do to prevent injuries. The nuance of like when do you move from like a 5K to a 6K run, that's a little trickier. But what I see is most people who get injured, it's just from 0 to 1,000. And that could apply to the bike too, right? Like we have to adapt to the bike. So start with a 30-minute or a 20-minute or a 10-minute, and then just build from there over time.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Okay, and then the next part of this question, that is, how can I speed up recovery?
Yeah, and I'm just reading a book by Christy Ashwandin called Good to Go.
Yeah.
And you were looking at too. Is it a popular book right now? Or
no, I think it was a couple of years
2019,
ago.
I think, is what I remember.
Yeah, I definitely remember having read at minimum the sample, if not the whole thing, because you keep referencing stuff in it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that. Right. So it might just be that like a lot of the points that she's making have come out in the last few years, but definitely was a pretty well-known book when it first came out. We should definitely, if Christy's listening, we'd love to have her on the podcast. But I think what's been funny for you, especially reading it, has been the realization that we've come so far with science and we have so many technologies and none of them work.
Well, and then it's just, she does a great job of laying out how it's very hard. The book opens with sort of her conducting a study about drinking beer. And if it affects, like if you run on Saturday, have beers after, does it affect the Sunday? And so they actually did an actual study, and sort of came out, and then it looked like women actually did better by drinking beer the next day. It actually improved their recovery. Men, it wasn't so good, but it was like not clear, assuming they didn't drink a ton. But then when you started actually looking at the data, there was a lot of reasons that it like, that's fine. Like that's the study comes out looking that way, but it was a small sample. They did a test that was really boring, basically. Like it was just ride at this pace until you're too tired to continue. But that requires you to be quite motivated. And a lot of times what you'll see is people don't continue because they've already done that once and they're just like, I need to go home. right? If I just stop, so then they'll do worse the next time potentially.
I'm also going to make so many arguments here as far as like women and like third shift, where like getting to stay and drink a beer after a workout means you're like hanging out with friends, not going home to like clean the house, get dinner on the table, deal with your kids,
so I think
all that stuff.
The idea is that like that's actually, she talks about like putting a narrative around it, and then we like fit the narrative to the study. But the idea is that the study wasn't actually great. Right, it was her own study. That's what she said. Right, it wasn't a great, like, it's still not clear. Right, so and that's a lot of the stuff. It just is not really clear, and it's hard to isolate. Was this a placebo effect? They see that a lot of times with altitude camps. We all feel great that we're at an altitude camp and we're actually training. You know, you've eliminated a lot of things, and you get this like camp effect. So then it's hard to say, was it the altitude that made you better? And then actually cold we spoke about, and so she speaks a lot about cold and how cold is something that we have this like, it's, you can't mask it, so you can't really study it by saying like you're not in a cold bath and you are, because it's obvious that you're in a cold bath. So it's hard to ever, you know, blind the test.
Right.
And then because it's miserable, there's an expectation that it's better. And we have, she talks about massage is similar, where if it's really painful, we think it's going to be beneficial. So then it ends up like, you know, you feel better afterwards.
I also feel like there's a lot of massage therapists that like know that.
Right.
And like we'll have that moment where we both had one where she just like goes in on your glutes, and you're like, this is just your like thing that you do to all athletes so that they feel like they got this like really intense athlete massage.
Sure. So I think that book is good. We also did a recent episode, Marginal Gains for Masters, where we also speak around some of these things that like not a lot works. You know, it's all such marginal gains that it's hard as a master's to spend much time or money on these things, because most of us, as I alluded to in the beginning, have a lot of ways that we could, if we wanted to, spend our time and money. And so the big rocks, as we use that phrase way too much in that episode, but the concepts, the things that, you know, really pay off are the boring things. You know, eating enough before and during your workout, which most masters are adverse to because they're always thinking about weight. And then sleeping more, which most masters are limited on time, and it's hard. But she paints a great narrative around the value of napping, you know, getting to bed an extra hour early. They did a bunch of studies with some basketball teams where they sort of said like you need to be in bed for 11 hours, I think it was 6 weeks. And the improvements they had were amazing. And they replicated that study a few times with a few different teams, where it was just like, you just need to be in bed for 11 hours. So it was like a big increase from say 8 or 9. They might have been in bed before. And then, yeah, like shooting accuracy, their happiness, their mood, I should say, all improved. Like is pretty neat, the benefits, right? And so can we all be in bed for 11 hours? I don't know, right? But sometimes it's like, well, you know, you're making the time to go and do this random ice bath and buying the ice bath and, you know, getting the ice. I don't even know where you get the ice. You know, it's like, well, you could also go to bed, right? But a lot of us won't do that. So as far as recovery, that's the big stuff is the fueling the workout, which a lot of us have not tried. So it's worth trying if your recovery is slowing. You know, eating good balanced meals, you know, a bit of the protein, the bit of the veggies, lots of the carbs, you know, if you're training hard. And then the other piece that I see a lot when we're talking about recovery is we just haven't really adjusted our expectations, or we're following a plan for like an 18-year-old or just a dumb plan. And the idea is that if you're not recovering in time for the next hard workout, maybe the workouts are too hard. And so you have like a hero, if it's a hero workout that you can barely make it through, a 10 out of 10, that's too hard. Go back to like an 8 out of 10 workout. This is the rating of the session RPE, the how hard was that workout when you finished, right? Could you keep going? So a 10 out of 10 workout to me is like when you see those athletes collapse at the finish line and they can't stand up, right? Or when you vomit off your trainer, or like your spouse has to come down and help you. I always joke about this, but I've seen this happen. Those are 10 out of 10s, and I would not recommend doing them, you know, very often, if at all. We save that for the race day because you're also a master, you know, you're an adult. You have to go do other stuff. But also we know that the next day you need to train again, consistency. So if you do a 10 out of 10 and then on Sunday you skip your long ride, we might need to adjust that, or adjust the fueling, or a bit of both. Right? If you fuel more in that hard group ride on Saturday, maybe you can do your long ride on Sunday because you don't feel so blasted, right? Because your body hasn't been taken to that extra level of stress, right? And that's what the depletion is a level of stress. So that's what I would say. The other thing is sort of programming effectively rather than a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday intensity. Maybe we go with the Wednesday, Saturday, or Tuesday, Saturday, or something like that for the hard workouts. and then watch those hero endurance rides too on the weekend. Like, I don't think most of us need to be doing 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 10-hour rides very often. If it's a challenge and it's something on your schedule, that's like a race to me. That's an event. But the bread and butter should be these like lots of 60 to 90 minutes because we're time limited. Maybe on the weekend getting a 3-hour fairly consistently. I think for a lot of people, I'm talking about cycling here, but running probably, what would that be, like a 2-hour maybe for like a trail runner would be pretty similar. 90 to 2 hours maybe for a trail runner, like a long run, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's, it's just bread and butter. You're just rhyming those off, and the quality can keep increasing, but also you keep adapting to it. You have lots of energy for it, lots of motivation to continue across seasons. And that's really, I think, super critical. But that's what I see a lot of times with recovery is it's just, we're trying to be ready the day after something hard, and you weren't supposed to be ready the day. So if you have back-to-back intensity workouts, like why?
Yeah, and I mean, this is really the, reason for your 3-month custom plans, because that way it's actually like tailored to you, your current fitness, your age, your schedule, your goals, all that. So quick plug, you can head over to consummateathlete.com and check that out if that is
and that's what you said earlier
interest.
too, people don't finish the plans because they have to move them or whatever, right? And that is true. I think our completion rate, we should keep a better track of the completion rate, but it's quite high with those 3-month plans that people get through to the end. And we always say 80% is a passing grade. They probably do about 80% on average. But it's much better than the plans that, are going to have the off day on the wrong day. It's the wrong sport for you, and you're just sort of mismashing. You also do CrossFit. That was the one I did last week, was someone was trying to do CrossFit and do this bike program. And I was like, no, you just need to get a custom plan, because we have to account for the CrossFit. We can't just slam a bunch of bike workouts on top of that. Like you can be a cyclist and do CrossFit. We love that. But, we have to account for the fact that you're really CrossFitting. And believe in that. I think I've seen people have great results with that, but you can't also do the same thing that, like, me as a pure mountain bike racer, and I'm doing my 2 or 3 intensity days. It's a little different when you're also slamming out CrossFit or high intensity, whatever, right? Strength training, whatever you're into.
For sure. Okay, I love that. Do you want to just hit this one quick little follow-up question, and then we'll come back to the
Which follow-up are you talking about?
The Greg Lehman one, and then we can come back to another. I think it's a whole episode of how to modify or abort a workout.
Sure.
Okay, so the follow-up to your episode with Greg Lehman, where we were talking about running, injury prevention, what to do with rehabbing injuries. So this person says, thank you so much for your time and providing evidence for what actually works. However, my brain is trying to convince me that it could be counterproductive loading something, he names gastrocnemius, soleus, and Achilles tendon, which feels tender and feels, quote, injured. So say there are some tendon micro tears that are causing the pain. The concern is that will it get worse with loaded movements? Should I wait a certain time before it's not, or where it's not painful, before I start the rehab? And I think this question makes a lot of sense, especially for runners. I'm thinking about plantar fasciitis, where, like, that one, I would argue, if you're in pain, it's going to be really tricky to rehab while in pain.
Yeah, and this is one, I wish Greg was just here to answer this.
Yeah, it would be great.
But I think what we probably were speaking towards, I think we talked about, but maybe we weren't clear enough, or maybe in that episode. Sometimes when you have people on multiple times, you like refer back, but not everyone's listened to every episode with Greg that we've done, or even just sometimes I worry that, like, I've listened to everything Greg's ever done, and so I assume all this stuff because I'm familiar with his work. But certainly, if you have an acute injury, you've had a little tear of your Achilles or your plantar fasciitis, or just it's very sore, you'd want to be careful just going in and suddenly, well, Greg said to load up the squat rack and do a bunch of jumping or do a bunch of whatever, right? Like we'd want to first get out of that initial phase.
Okay, but what does out of that official phase or that phase mean? Because you just said, like, you have an injury, but a lot of people wouldn't know whether or not it's an injury or just like a little niggle, or oh, it's tender because I, stubbed my toe or whatever, versus like, oh no, there's actually something wrong.
So I think, you can always wait a day or two. That's probably smart, and just see. And then this is that gradual progression, right? Like, how gradual do we come back, and what does that exactly mean? But I think, Greg would say, probably you could go get checked out, when in doubt. If it's suddenly, especially if it's an explosive thing, you're running. I have a few clients that really run like track running, and they're in their 40s and 50s, and you'll get like an actual, like, I've never had this, knock on wood, but the tendon, the wow, like I was sprinting and it, you blow your hamstring. So that's something that I would probably go get checked out and start like into a bit of a rehab program. And that would start slow with your traditional physio sort of like exercises, right? Where you're building that up. If, hopefully it's not surgery or anything like that. Some of the stuff, would be an obvious surgery. And I don't think that's what they're saying, right? They're saying that it's not clear.
Right. So there's the obvious, like, take it slow, start out, we're not like loading this with like, you're not doing the most explosive jumps on an injured foot here.
No.
And also, would you say if the pain continues or worsens, that's like back right off?
Right. Yeah. And that's sometimes what you'll see with injuries is, it's fine during the day and then you start running and it hurts. Or it's fine during the run, but then it hurts at a certain point, or it hurts after. So Greg and I talked through that a little bit. I think also when we had Chris Johnson on, we maybe spoke a bit about this as well. And sort of those, like, physiotherapists are very good at that. Like, if it hurts during, or if it hurts at a certain point, or if it only hurts after, what does that mean? I'm less good with that stuff, but to me, the thing is, we want it to start improving. So we don't want to push it so hard that it's not improving. So you'd start gradual, sort of like I was saying with those run walks. So maybe you just do a walk and see, okay, it was fine the whole day and fine the next day, and I actually feel a little better. Okay, and then the next day, maybe it's just that maybe one little run for 30 seconds towards the end of that, where you've warmed up really nicely, and then you go. Greg spoke a bit about maybe if it always starts hurting at 15 minutes into the run, maybe you just do 2 10-minute runs even in the same day. And he really likes that, increasing the frequency rather than trying to always beat your head against going longer. Just keep them super short, but try and play with frequency to try and keep the volume up. But that's probably, I would just wait a few days, maybe go get checked out, and then think about just gradually easing into some of this stuff that he spoke about, the loading and the jumping. So you could do maybe calf raises on the ground unloaded as a start back, right? And maybe just 10, and then again, see how was it during, right after, next day. Okay, that was okay. Then the next day I'm going to try, 15 or 20 or 2 sets of 10 or something, right? Just even sprinkled across the day. So I think that was the idea. But I think that whenever you're not sure and it seems like it might be something, I would go get checked out for sure before you start applying the ideas of like loading stuff. But that's Greg's solution a lot of times, is that we do start back into doing things like squats and things like that, which again is, as far as shifting the load around, remember that you could, if it's an Achilles tendon, maybe you could do something like a squat or something to try and keep the body moving and sort of get that stimulus for adaptation as well into the body as well.
Love it. Okay. As usual, hit us up with any questions, any follow-up questions over at consummateathlete.com. We have a fancy contact page. You can find us at consummateathlete on Instagram. Leave us a DM there. I hesitate to say leave us YouTube comments because frankly, comments on YouTube terrify me because they're usually mean. So Peter's the one that has to look at them. Sorry, Peter.
Well, I didn't even know we got them. This one just came out of nowhere. Yeah. And then it was positive. So I was surprised. I was like, okay, YouTube, you're doing better.
All right. Thank you for that. Yeah. Appreciate it. And thank you to anyone who subscribed, rated, reviewed. We just put out a thing last week, just kind of reminding everyone to do it. We do have a fancy new podcast cover art. So now is the time to go rate and review if you want to check that out. All right. As always, happy training, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.